Hello and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, July 13th. This is your daily Buckeye Fix. I'm Tony Gerdeman. The Minnesota game is in 51 days, and the game against Michigan is in 138 days. Tom, of course, is on vacation. This week he's visiting famous television houses. I said yesterday he would be back on Monday. That is not the case. He took a spill at the Brady Bunch house. Now he's going to be out a few extra days, and no, it wasn't on the famous staircase at the Brady Bunch house. He actually wiped out on the two steps down to Mike's office from the living room. Totally ridiculous that he would even do that, but he whiffed, tore a couple of ligaments in his knee. And now the worst part is he's going to miss the Mr. Belvedere house, which is pretty much the only reason why he took his family out there. But he will eventually be back. He may be a little bit grumpier when he arrives. Just be aware of the trials that he has been through. So joining me today is Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. Mark hosts a number of shows on his YouTube channel, which you can find at youtube.com/MarkRogersTV, or also just search Mark Rogers TV and you'll find it there. I am one of the guests of one of his many shows. You can find me and some Ohio State panelists on Wednesdays, generally around 2 p.m. Mark does all kinds of national shows, call-in shows. So I thought, let's bring him on. Let's talk some college football. And Mark, thank you for joining me. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Tony. I'm starting to think that maybe you're having me on, not necessarily anticipating this to be a good guest, but basically as payback for all the times that you've been on my show and I've been able to take my shots at you and set you up for the many viewer attacks.
You know me well, and the years we have spent together, you should expect a barrage today. Basically, I'm just going to feed you stuff, let you go. I may just take some notes, watch some television while you're going, because this is going to be right in your wheelhouse. What I wanted to talk about today is the national title picture, the playoff picture in college football, because I am of the opinion that if you give me Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State, I will give you the field regarding the national title. Where are you? Are those your three? And you can let anybody else have any, and the rest of the teams, where are you on that?
Well, I think your verbiage makes the distinction right there. And I think that's very important because I think with a lot of people, they just think, okay, are you a national college football playoff contender? Should you make the playoffs? Versus winning a national title, two entirely different levels of football here. We bring the Oregons into play, not to discount them for a national championship, but certainly as the premier program currently in the Pac-12, do they have a good shot at making the playoff? Check the box. Yes, they do. I'm not necessarily making that prediction. I'm just saying that they could make the playoff. Wouldn't shock me. Oregon winning a national championship, the two wins that you have to achieve once you reach that playoff versus that 12 to 13 games to win the conference, it's probably 3 times, 5 times, I don't even know that it can be calculated, more difficult to win those two games than it was to make it through a season, let's say in the Big 12 or the Pac-12. I'm going to pick on those two, the ACC in particular, versus winning 2 playoff games against elite competition.
And the scheduling, just those 2 playoff games are, a lot of these teams only play 2 tough games during the regular season. And then to have to win those 2 games, which are, so much more difficult, it really separates the program. So are you the national title is coming from one of these 3 teams?
Yeah, so I'm on board with you because of that distinction between just reaching the playoff versus the national championship. We've not seen anybody else aside from the LSU splash year of 2019, and Joe Burrow's not coming back, neither is Joe Brady, to be able to make that run. The numbers I don't have at the top of my head, but I've run them. I'm sure you have in regards to the percentage of the games that are won by those 3 versus everybody else. They've basically won all the games in the playoffs. The only teams that beat them are themselves. LSU's got the 1 win outside of that group. That's it.
And it's amazing. And it doesn't look like things are going to change. However, there are some reasons why each of these 3 teams could miss the playoffs this year. And so I wanted to just talk a little bit about each one and see maybe who is the most likely to miss the playoffs. And I want to start with Alabama. And all 3 of these teams are starting with a new quarterback. I don't know how much that matters anymore as a weakness. when you look at the way these offenses just continue to churn out offense points and the way they just manhandle defenses and take advantage of all of the talent around them. So I don't know that it's necessarily a weakness anymore. I think Alabama, and they have 3 returning starters. That doesn't bother me. Nick Saban recruits like nobody else. So you have to look at their schedule and look for where there might be losses. Now I've got an NFL scout in my ear saying Georgia is going to win the SEC and they're going to come out of the SEC. But if you look at Alabama's schedule, there has to be 2 losses on here, and 2 losses may not be enough. Miami and Atlanta, that doesn't really concern me. At Florida, maybe. At Texas A&M, eventually Texas A&M has to win, has to beat Alabama. LSU at home, at Auburn versus Georgia in the SEC championship game. Are there 2 losses in there? How do you see Alabama progressing through the season, and what do you think their chances are of missing the playoffs?
Yeah, to put a metric to the statement you just made about experience versus lack of experience at quarterback, that is traditional thought, and there is some value there, some validity to having an experienced quarterback. Trevor Lawrence in his 3rd year gives you something that you exactly know what you're getting versus Bryce Young in his 1st year at Alabama. But let's consider, if you go back to 2013, add up those 8 national championship games, so 16 teams appeared in those 8 championship games. Exactly half of those 16 quarterbacks had virtually no experience and no starting experience entering that season. So Bryce Young, good to go. CJ Stroud, most likely good to go to make a playoff appearance. I think Texas A&M is the biggest challenge to Alabama within the division. They are loaded on defense. They bring back everybody on defense aside from Buddy Johnson, Bobby Brown up front. They're stacked on defense. Their metrics were really great on defense last year. Offensively, their skill position players are exceptional and back. The offensive line has been one of the best in college football in recent years, but they lose a ton. They take their best offensive lineman, they move him from guard to tackle, Kenyon Green, and they've got a very much Ohio State-like quarterback situation. Haynes King is the athlete. He's the guy that everybody wants to see because he's the superstar athlete. Zach Calzada is the thrower, but they both have a handful of pass attempts, and that's it. And that's the big wild card there. And for some reason, it just seems like more of a question mark when you put the name Texas A&M, lack of experience at starting quarterback, versus Alabama, lack of experience at starting quarterback.
I'm exactly the same way. If this was a senior Kellen Mond, then you're thinking, wow, Texas A&M has a real good chance because they have experience at quarterback, and you dismiss it with everybody else. I love Isaiah Spiller, their running back. He's tremendous. And maybe that's a guy that they can ride. But you look at, this is probably the toughest schedule of the 3 teams that we're talking about. But I don't know that there's 2 losses, maybe at Texas A&M and then maybe Georgia in the SEC championship game. I think that's the most likely scenario, and I don't know how likely that actually is.
That is the most likely scenario. Georgia, Alabama, maybe we're shaping up to another one of those possible years of a 2-team SEC entry into the playoff like 2017. I, like your NFL friend, I ranked Georgia as the number 1 team in the country following the national championship game. My way too early top 25 was Georgia number 1. Now, since then, they lost their best receiver, George Pickens. He probably will make it back unless he has just surefire NFL aspirations like, I'm going to skip this season, just get ready for the draft. He should be ready by 3/4 of the way through the season. Best wide receiver they have. But they picked up Eric Gilbert. Eric Green used to play for the Steelers a long, long time ago. Eric Gilbert, an exceptional 5-star tight end from LSU, who made one of these paths that we're going to have to get used to. LSU last season, Florida during the offseason, but never played for them, and now to Georgia. So he's going to play like a Elijah Kyle Pitts kind of tight end wide receiver role. And they also picked up what was going to be a 1st or 2nd round NFL cornerback in Darian Kendrick from Clemson. And they pick up Tyke Smith. He was one of the best cornerbacks in the Big 12 from West Virginia. So I think Georgia's fortified that loss of Pickens elsewhere.
The transfer portal is funny. You mentioned that one. Illinois had a receiver transfer to Wake Forest after the season, take part in spring practice with Wake Forest, and then come back to Illinois. Very, very odd. So let's move to Ohio State. 6 starters returning on offense, 5 on defense, questions in the secondary, a new quarterback that I think will put up numbers just as Ryan Day's quarterbacks always do. All of his quarterbacks have been first team All Big Ten. Can anybody take advantage of those, I guess, weaknesses in the Big Ten? Can Oregon do it? And then can somebody else come in, be it a Penn State or a Big Ten championship game, to give Ohio State that second loss? Where are the options for Ohio State missing out on the playoffs here?
From a personnel standpoint, I think it's linebacker secondary, of course, as we know. But I also think running back is a curious place because I think the room is really deep with really good players that have the potential of being really good, outstanding collegiate players. But if nobody exceeds Master Teague, and I don't want to discount his ability to play well against good teams, but I don't think he's ever going to be a dynamic back. And I think that might be needed. A J.K. Dobbins kind of guy carrying the running game, or a combination of Pryor, Henderson, and Crowley, or some combination of something that gives them a little bit more of a home run threat than what we know that they've got with Master Teague.
You look at their
from a
last
scheduling standpoint, I was just going to say, I'm sorry, Tony, that from a scheduling standpoint, I think the Oregon game's a little bit more interesting than maybe some other people that are counting it up as a win just because it's at home.
It's going to be an interesting one, and it's one that Oregon missed out on last year, and certainly they need this game to prove themselves. And if they win that game, then they can, I don't want to say coast through the Pac-12, but they don't need to be as dominant if they can get a win against Ohio State. The running game situation at Ohio State: 2002 won a national championship with Maurice Clarett. 2014 won a national championship with Ezekiel Elliott. Common denominator: get an all-time great running back and then ride them. And does Ohio State have that? Some would say Travion Henderson, but as a freshman, I mean, it worked with Maurice Clarett. It took Ezekiel Elliott a second year to be that guy. Let's move to Clemson. 5 starters returning on offense, 9 on defense, with a couple other guys who have starters experience as well. My NFL guy is like, Clemson's defensive line, they were young last year. Now they're ready. I think a lot of people look at the way Clemson was just pushed around on both sides of the ball by Ohio State last year has maybe diminished them, and certainly some eyes of those who follow Ohio State and just saw Ohio State beat them up and saw Ohio State probably should have won the year before. But you look at their schedule, I'd say it's a 2-game schedule, starting with Georgia at the outset, and then maybe North Carolina in the championship game, although maybe at North Carolina State, that's probably there. So maybe a 3-game schedule where if they lose that Georgia game, they can't lose another game, especially to teams that maybe like ranked 22 in the nation or something like that.
Yeah, the NC State game is more of a, in no way do we compare those two teams overall, but it's a puncher's chance kind of game. Pitt did it to Clemson in 2016 with James Conner at running back. NC State actually almost did it to them to cost them a national championship game that same year, but missed a field goal that would have won the game. So for me with Clemson, offensively, DJ Uiagalelei, I think, has shown enough in big games, Notre Dame on the road. He brought that team back. Everybody gravitates to that Notre Dame performance, and rightfully so. But a week earlier, his first start, they played Boston College, and they were down 28-6. And here's a guy making his first start, and he brings them back for the victory. So that was impressive against a quality opponent. Defensively, they were devastating in 2018 with one of those all-time great defensive lines. The thing is have they settled into this, we're going to own the ACC, we're so much better than the ACC, but really we've kind of leveled off and we're not what we were 2016 through 18. And one thing that indicates that for me is that if you look at their defensive statistics, they've been dominant the last 2 years statistically. Like their metrics are all through the roof, like top 3, 5 in the nation across the board. But when they play somebody like Justin Fields and those wide receivers, or Joe Burrow and those wide receivers, then they show that they're no longer an elite defense. And that needs to be fixed. They bring back a ton of starters from last year's unit, but they're starters that were beat up by two really good offenses the last 2 years in the playoffs.
You mentioned settling into the ACC. It kind of reminds me of the Jim Tressel years of Ohio State settling into the Big Ten and then getting to the BCS or whatever and not having enough of whatever and getting overpowered. And that's interesting that could be the case. And so as I look at these three teams and I wonder who is the most likely to miss the playoffs, I guess I have to go with the team with the most difficult schedule, which is Alabama. But I think Clemson starts out 0-1 against Georgia. And would I be shocked? I guess, would I be surprised to see them lose one of their next 12 games? No, because that's more of their history than not. We've seen it almost losing to North Carolina a few years ago. So I was leaning towards Alabama, but now I think maybe Clemson is the team of these three most likely to miss the playoffs. Who do you have?
Like you, I think they're going to lose to Georgia. I think that's like a 60-40 split right there, but I think they lose that game. I think what's going to be crucial is how do they look in that loss? I think the loser of that game, especially if it's Clemson with their league, is going to still be in good shape. If they lose a 35-31 game, in some senses, it's almost better than a victory against most of their schedule in the eyes of the playoff committee that's going to say, well, if you can play within a field goal of one of the four best teams in the country, we're almost going to credit you more so with that than we would with a win against a middling team in the ACC. So I think Clemson's in good shape as long as they stay close to Georgia. I think the team with the highest chance of missing the playoffs between those three is Ohio State.
Expound.
I just think the Oregon game could be tricky. And I know that the schedule's weak in the Big Ten. My point would be much stronger if they had Wisconsin, Iowa, or some mixture of decent teams out of the Big Ten West. I know Penn State's at home as well. I do think that they could just get tripped up once and then maybe a Big Ten championship game against an Iowa or Wisconsin. I don't think it's likely, but out of those three, that's the team I'm going to go with.
I think Wisconsin could be very dangerous this year. Ohio State, once they get into that Big Ten championship game, it's not always that easy for them. Stuff goes wrong. Stuff isn't, things start slowly. Other teams build confidence, and then Ohio State has to fight out of a hole. And so that could definitely be the case there. So let's talk about who outside of the field has the best option, has the best chance. Now, I'm going to give you, I think there's only four other teams with the possibility of winning a national title. And I don't think they really have the possibility. I would just say that they're playoff worthy and maybe make somebody scared. Oklahoma, Georgia, Texas A&M, and Notre Dame, because they've made the playoffs. But I don't see them as a threat. For me, and I've said this before, they are a non-playable character in the game of college football. Like they move the storyline along. You go to them and they'll tell you where to find the jewels if you're playing some role-playing game or something like that. You don't actually win by being Notre Dame. They're just a side thing. And so that's kind of what they are. Like we've seen them make the playoffs. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they make the playoffs again, but I don't know that a winner, a national title is coming out of, Oklahoma, Georgia, Texas A&M, or the three we mentioned. I don't know that anybody else really has a shot to get through those six, let alone the top three that we're talking about.
So much like what we started out this conversation with, the difference between making the playoff and the difference between that and winning the national title, I'm going to split that vote in that I'm more confident that Oklahoma, because of the conference, is going to make the playoff, but I'm more confident than Georgia could win 2 playoff games and win a national championship.
I like that. I would agree. I think Oklahoma and Georgia can both get in there. Oklahoma's defense is improving. Is it good enough? There's only one way to find out. It never has been. And plus they have to find a way to beat Kansas State, which they struggle with, and some random, if they lose to Kansas State and Iowa State again, forget about it. I don't even consider Iowa State in this playoff picture because they have as many inexplicable losses as anybody in the nation when you talk about programs with high expectations. So I guess of Oklahoma, you say Georgia, you have a higher percentage, a higher thought of them winning it all. Is there any other team out there? You mentioned Oregon being a possibility for the playoffs, but can you see any other team running that gauntlet and winning the national title?
If you want to go, winning the national champion, that's right. It's actually winning those two games, because I'm going to throw you a real wild card in Arizona State. Now we have all those crazy allegations and what appears to be going wrong there off the field there. But Jaden Daniels, the quarterback, they bring back just everybody on offense. They only played 4 games last year. I think they can win a very much Big Ten Western kind of Pac-12 South. No dominant teams, but a lot of good teams that are interesting division race there. And then I'll go back to your Iowa State mention there and just say that they are so experienced, arguably the best running back in the nation, arguably the best tight end in the nation, Charlie Kohler, Xavier Hutchinson at wide receiver. The offense is entirely back. All offensive linemen, Brock Purdy at quarterback. If they can, will probably win a lot of one-score games against the likes of the TCUs and Texases within. So if they can walk the tightrope, get through, even lose to Oklahoma, get the rematch win in the Big 12 championship game. They only lost by 6 to the Sooners in the conference title game last year. That would be my one team outside of the Big 5, I believe, that I would go with.
I also think watch out for Wisconsin in terms of making the playoffs, because they could run through their schedule. We saw Iowa in 2015, Wisconsin in 2014, 17. Where if they had just won the Big Ten championship game, they would have been in the playoffs. And so that's one of the things that the Big Ten West always has. If there can just be a team that's just a little bit better than everybody else in their division, they can end up in the playoffs, provided they beat Ohio State. So I want to thank you, Mark. I think that's going to do it for this show. Let us know, let everybody know where they can find you and where they can watch your stuff.
Yeah, so as Tony mentioned off the top, Mark Rogers TV on YouTube. So you can just search Mark Rogers TV, Voice of College Football on YouTube. It's also easy to find by just putting in markrogerstv.com. Take you right to YouTube, and we'll direct you from there, because we got 22 team channels, so a lot to dive into. But just find us on the main channel right there.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of stuff there, because I know we'll be recording an Ohio State show. That'll be coming like right after a Miami show and right before Florida State. So it's when I say, and we talk about Mark Rogers being the voice of college football, like he's got all kinds of shows from all sorts of fan bases. So if you're a fan of college football, check it out, and I'm sure you'll find something there. So reminder for all of you, check out BuckeyeScoop.com. All kinds of stuff for you there. If not yet a member, feel free to join. Check out the Ask the Insiders message board. There's plenty of stuff there for you. So we will thank Mark, and we will thank you guys for listening and watching, and we will talk to you all later.